Cheers, guys. Epix911, welcome to the Elitist Geek VR news for Tuesday, October 25th, 2016. Let's jump right into VR. Start with a game called Obduction by the same devs who created Myst and Riven. It launched August of this year, and when it did, it was supposed to also include the virtual reality capability. It did not. At the time, the devs said they were still a few weeks away. There had been at least 1 or 2 reviews of the virtual reality version at that time, but essentially until then, those of us who did not get to try that have been waiting. The wait is over. It will be released next week. If you supported them via Kickstarter, you're going to get your copy a few days earlier. It's going to wrap into the code automatically just via Steam update. Likewise, those of us who bought the game for VR, we can expect that same update a few days later next week than the Kickstarter backers and be able to get in on virtual reality and Obduction. Next up, we have Somnia. Now, this is an experience from visual effects giant Framestore, and it's also their first original IP for virtual reality. And it's an interesting article, and I'll include the link, in that it covers, what we know, but to hear a dev actually say it is another thing. And what I mean by that is they specifically state that, look, they didn't want their first virtual reality program or application to be a game because of the risk with the user install base. They were able to mitigate a lot of that risk simply by creating, virtual reality narrative experience instead. That's going to be their first, possibly a game based on that afterwards once they see how that performs. Virtual Reality Source. This is a website I've been using more and more, really good for VR news. They have an article about the best virtual reality racing games out right now, and there's a whole slew, and it's not limited to just traditional arcade or sim racing, but the Wipeout style as well. In fact, they have Redout covered. Some other ones, the obvious contenders, Dirt Rally, Project Cars, and VR Karts are examples. Check that article out. That's on VRSource.com. So first up in the news, we get word today that Google has acquired eye tracking company Eyefluence, and an unnamed source, this according to Road to VR, from Engadget is essentially saying, look, they didn't do this acquisition because of Daydream or for Daydream. No, this is for an as of yet unnamed, no details project that they are working on. That, according to that same source, is neither going to be mobile or tethered to a PC. So definitely curious on that one. The company that they acquired goes by the name of Movidius. And interesting to see where they go with that. I am very curious. And I wouldn't imagine it be too long. Probably next spring, at least we'll get a sense. Depends on how long it takes acquisition-wise to get these guys on board and the planning. Come to think of it, probably after spring, maybe summer, winter, or fall next year, we should have an idea about direction. Next up, HTC teasing a Big Vive game/experience that, according to them, is going to thrill and delight VR fans. Now, they haven't committed to any specific details yet, but Joel Breton, who's HTC's VP of Content, has gone on the record to say that the next 6 months will have reveals of what is being worked on, again, that will thrill and delight VR fans. So we kind of figured that out. It's nice to get some confirmation. Of course, a lot of that could just be hype, right? Pre-holiday hype in general to keep the momentum, keep the focus on their unit. But if it ends up being true and we are literally just weeks, months away from some fantastic experiences, the wait will definitely have been worth it. Next news piece, Xiaomi, a Chinese company, reveals a $30 mobile HMD. It kind of looks like a cross, at least according to Upload VR, and I tend to agree, a cross between the Gear VR and the Sony PlayStation VR. Hell of an attractive price, $30. Now, no international version as of yet planned because all of the Xiaomi phones that are compatible with the device are sold in China only. So nothing available internationally now or in the short term. Next article, Dante Buckley. He is the Onward for HTC Vive fame dev. And Upload VR has a really cool article on him in that it just essentially it tells the story of how this game development, his company, how that all came about literally the last 2 years. So rewind about 2 years ago and have a read of it. I'll just summarize it here. He was contemplating dropping out of college, not sure what to do, always enjoyed FPS games while growing up, decided, you know what, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drop out of college and I'm going to put nose to the grindstone and essentially just code 14 plus hours a day and try to make something of it. And literally within about a year after, setting that as a goal for himself, he did exactly that. And look, comparing Onward to commercial titles, yeah, absolutely crushing, right? But if you compare them to, let's take an indie developer that's been in the business 20 plus years, Jeff Vogel. He makes some fantastic old school RPGs. I really like a lot of his games. He's come out on the record and saying, look, 5 to 20,000 is, about what I expect per game. And it's usually towards the lower end of that. Now, granted, if you're an indie dev and you're basically a one-person operation, much like Dante, there's more of the revenue pie left after everybody else has had their piece. Now, he's basically said he's sold 18,000 copies. And again, I know that doesn't sound like a hell of a lot, but this is, a brand new game. It's not existing IP. It's a try me on VR despite having absolutely no references in the gaming industry. And people enjoy it. So they've even had some nice peak population loads. And 18,000 copies at $25 a pop. It's about 400,000 in sales revenue. Granted, Steam gets their cut of the pie, but still, you know what? When all is said and done, paying yourself a salary of a couple $100,000 US, not too bad, Dante, for a first year. So, my concern, and one of the people who commented in his columns is burnout. 14 plus hour days for a year. That's a pretty hefty workload. So best of luck for Dante, not just for continuing to develop Onward. That's something he's gone on record as saying he's obviously going to do, but any future projects. And he says he's got about 5 to 10 different game ideas. So definitely be interested in seeing what Dante comes up with after this. All right, next news piece. Valve has an answer, an update today, an answer to Oculus's Asynchronous Timewarp feature, which we talked about a few days ago is essentially reprojection and a slightly different technique of doing the reprojection. Well, now Valve has put their own asynchronous time warp into the latest SteamVR Beta. So if that's something that interests you, it doesn't currently work for AMD GPUs. Not sure if that's going to change. They didn't specify in the article. And for NVIDIA, it's going to require an updated display driver. Now, whether that's the one released October 22nd or a yet not released version, not sure. If I find out, I will annotate this or at least put it into the description below. Next news piece, IrisVR has raised $8 million in Series A funding. What these guys do, and it's not gaming and it's not glamorous, but it is still pretty damn cool, is they specialize in architecture software, design software for architecture, and their hope with this funding is to create an application that can take 3D blueprints or drawings of, somebody's prospective home and convert those into a 360/VR experience, perhaps one that you can walk around in. Very cool. That's one of the things we have talked about is real estate in general, how much VR and 360 can benefit. Not the fish eye lens stuff, but the more advanced stuff coming down the pipe would be fantastic for real estate. Same thing I think applies here on the architecture and design side. Being able to walk through, like when we built this basement here, it was unfinished. You kind of have a rough idea based on a 2D drawing, but you can't picture the finished product. And I know there's stuff out there like Google SketchUp, I don't even know if they make that anymore, and other types of actual full-blown architectural software, still not the same as being able to strap on an HMD and walk around in it, right? That would have been an amazing tool to have when we were finishing this basement. Next up, 3 game dev veterans have joined forces to create a VR game studio called Drifter Entertainment. So the 3 in question, the founders, Ray Davis, and he was a GM for Unreal Engine 4, also the lead programmer for Gears of War 1 and 2, both of which, I was a fan of. I love both of those games. Kenneth Scott, art director at id. He also worked for Microsoft Game Studios. And finally, Brian Murphy, who is an ex-creative designer at Microsoft and CTO of HoloLens. Very cool portfolios on these guys. The most inspiring for me, and unfortunately one of the ones most overlooked, is to have a founder lead programmer. That is a really good trait to have because it means you can properly hire other programmers, build that team without getting snowed, without, not being able to understand how code works. So I think I'm really looking forward to what they have. They say they have a bunch of ideas and games actually on the go. Can't wait to see what they reveal. Hopefully, the next original idea, right? I was thinking about that again earlier, and with conventional gaming, as much as critics of virtual reality like to say it's a gimmick and all the things we've hashed over and over again, we don't need to get into that here. How much could also be said of traditional gaming, right? Yes, there have been advances, but how many tired gaming cliches and ways of, standard ways of doing things have we essentially put up with, right? How much have first-person shooters really evolved, right? Obviously, there's been evolution, but has it been mind-blowing? RPGs, strategy games, same thing. There hasn't been something really cool and innovative, and when they are, they're far and few in between. So that basically nails my hope for VR in general, is that, look, we're not just going to see an awesome RPG or an awesome shooter in virtual reality. No, we're going to see something different for once. Maybe something down the pipe that combines genres, right? Just things that we can't predict right now. That's my hope for VR. That's why I get up literally every day and I'm excited about virtual reality. Not even close to being burnt out because there's just so much damn possibility. Next news piece and final news article has to do with common Oculus Rift problems and how to fix them. And this is also on VRSource.com. And some of the stuff, it's the standard things, right? What to do for motion sickness, tracking issues, driver incompatibility, blurry screens, those things. But what I like about how the article has approached it, it does it from the point of view that, look, it's not just the hardware or just the software responsible for this VR motion sickness that some people can experience. There are a lot of variables in play, and they touch on a lot of different variables in terms of their troubleshooting. So really cool article. Check that out. That's VRSource.com. All right, guys, that is it for me on this Tuesday for the news. As always, cheers, and definitely catch you guys on the VR flip side. Hopefully in some Sony PlayStation games coming up tonight. Cheers.